Hello, Gatterberry here. Let's talk about your notes for Chapter 5. There'll be some more notes, but this is kind of the first part of it. Just some notes on z-scores, all right? So take a look at z-scores. Okay, z-score is a way to express the distance a value is from the mean using standard deviations. Okay, so a z-score of 0 is the mean. I'm going to scan these. I'm going to put them into Canvas so you can take a look at this at a closer view if that helps you out, okay? But a z-score is just telling you how far something is from the average, right, from the mean. So a z-score of 0 means that it is average. It is perfectly the mean. If your z-score is positive, then something above average has a positive z-score. Something below average has a negative z-score. So things to keep in mind while you're working through these problems. A z-score is simply some value and then minus the average of that thing divided by the standard deviation of that thing. You're going to see me write it like this, where I say z equals x minus x bar divided by s. That's one way to write it. Okay. The book I know says y minus y. They use y. My personal preference is to use x. You see that like on the AP test and a lot of other things. So I prefer to use x and x bar, but any variable. So here's example 1, and it says find your z-score in the SAT math portion if you scored a 680. The mean is 528 with a standard deviation of 117. So what do we know? We know the value that we care about is 680, right? That's your score you got on the SAT. The average SAT math score is a 528 and it has a standard deviation of 117. Okay, these are the standard deviations calculated along with the average from all the data. I believe is from a year or two ago. It might be the 2018 scores or something, but I looked them online and that's what the scores I found. So I look at the equation. Z equals x minus x bar divided by s. I plug in what I know. X equals 680. X bar is 528. Divide that by 117. I get 152 over 117. Divide that and we get 1.299 for a final result. Okay. So that means that if this was your score, you would have scored a little over 1 standard deviation above the mean. Okay, about 1.3, right? 1.299. You scored fairly well, right? It's above average. Okay. Depending on the problem, depends on what's actually significantly above average. We'll look into what the standards are. And usually, if you think about anything above 2 is a great number. Anything above 1 is still considered above average. Okay. But 1.2 is something that's like, whoa, it's above average, but it's not too insane. Whoa, that's a good score. Good job. You got like a 2 or 2.5, you're like, whoa, you probably almost aced that test. You almost got a, 800 out of 800. I think it's around like a 2.5. Okay, so example 3. Let's say the same kind of problem, but let's say it's the English test. Okay, and we say test score was a 490. The average for the English test score is a 531 with a standard deviation of 104. Okay, if I plug it into my equation, z equals x minus x bar over s. 490 minus 531. So now our score was below the average. So you notice we get a negative value, which is a negative z-score. Okay, negative z-score just means it's below the average. Okay, and it's negative 0.39, so it's not very far below the average. It's still fairly average, right? If you or someone you knew got a 490 in the SAT with the average being 530, with a standard deviation of being 104, it's just a little below average, but it's still pretty average. It's nothing that's like too crazy. If you had like a negative 2, okay, you probably like, got like almost nothing right on the English test. But if it's close to 0, it's still fairly average. A little note here, since there was a math test and an English test, what you're going to see me probably start doing here, a lot of times, I'm going to zoom in a little, okay, is you can actually label your letters. Okay, so like Z math or Z English, instead of being like an exponent in the bottom, okay, kind of like the log, I kind of crossed it off so you don't get confused. We're not really doing logs, but those bases, you write it like below the word. So you could say like a Z math scores 1.299, Z English scores negative 0.4. You're writing that kind of in subscript. Third question we talked about today was, well, what if you looked at your total score, and let's say your total score was 1170, and the average SAT was 1059, and the standard deviation over the full test is 210. So if I take 1170 minus 1059, divide that by 10, I get 111, 10, so that would be 0.529, so about half, okay? Which means if the average was 1059, you scored half of one standard deviation above that, 0.529, which you could say my score of blank is blank standard deviations blank the mean. So the first blank was the value. My score of 1170 is the absolute value of the z-score, 0.529, standard deviations above the mean, positive. That's a good little format, kind of like a fill in the blanks, Mad Libs style. Okay, you're going to see that a lot in this class as we move forward when you're trying to explain things. It can be helpful to kind of see like a little like fill in the blank. So let's say you did this with your own SAT score, and let's say your total score was like a 1200 or 1100 or 1000 or 900, something like that. You could just fill that in, then you can give a little report and see that my score of, let's say it was 900, is blank, standard deviations blank, above or below mean. Okay, and just fill in the blank. Remember, absolute value is just a number without really any positive or negative attached to it. So if it's positive, it stays positive. Negative, positive. Because standard deviation is a distance. You can't really have a negative standard deviation, but you can have a standard deviation that goes below the mean. All right. Last question. This is kind of what this is getting to. Is really questions like this that say, let's say we got an SAT, right? Your SAT, your average, your standard deviation, your ACT, your average, your standard deviation. Okay, for the ACT, it's like the SAT, but similar, but different scoring system. The scoring system only goes to 36, and the standard deviation of that is 6. So the mean is 18, the standard deviation is 6. All right, so let's say we got two students, Marcio and Maria. And let's say Marcio scored a 32 on his ACT, and Maria scored a 1470 on her ACT. Okay, Marcio scored a 32 on his ACT, and Maria scored a 1470 on her SAT. Make that correctly. Who scored better? Okay, so he scored a 32 out of 36, and Maria scored a 1470 out of 1600. Okay, they both scored extremely well, but who actually scored better? So we're going to look at these scores to see who actually scored better. And Marcio, okay, according to these numbers here, 32 minus 18 divided by 6, I get 2.3, and that goes on forever. 2.3333333, so it's 14 over 6, which is like 7 over 3, which is the repeating decimal, which you get sometimes, okay? So don't forget those little rules of that. And then Maria here got a 1470, right? A great score. And you subtract it and divide it, and her z-score is a 1.957. Okay, that's a pretty big z-score. It's pretty far out from the average. So Marcio did better because his z-score of 2.3 is higher than Maria's z-score of 1.957. Right, those are both awesome scores. They both did very well. But if we're just going to compare those two tests and who did better on their respective test, we would say Marcio did because his z-score was higher, right? He only scored 14 points higher than the average, and she scored 400, almost 411 points higher than the average. But with standard deviations in play, we find the z-score tell that Marcio just simply had a better score compared to the others. Okay, all right, those are some basic notes. We're reviewing the notes from z-scores for today, Tuesday, November 22nd. Hopefully that helps you guys out that weren't able to catch the notes today. I will post scans of those pages to make it easy to read. Hopefully it's easy for you guys. If you have more questions, you guys can email me, okay? And I will see what I can do, or meet with you after school from 2 to 3. You can email me and set something up, or just ask the questions on Thursday. We should have some more free time. Okay, you guys have a great day. Bye.